Hello, my name is Negar Hashemi. I'm 49 years old and I am a mom of three thriving, delightful kids, ages 19, 16, and 10. I got married to a kind, loving man when I was 22 years old, and I remained in that marriage for almost 25 years. I accepted my sexual orientation after leaving my marriage, and I came out a year later. I'm currently in a relationship with a woman to whom I feel connected in more ways that I could ever imagine I could have. And professionally, I'm a lawyer with the Department of Justice. So I came out in my mid 40s, and you ask if there is a right time to come out. And I really don't think so. I don't think this is not a one size fits all approach or question. It's a very personal and complex decision. For me, I was not even ready to consider my sexual orientation until my mid 40s. And it had a lot to do with my personality, with my upbringing and my life experiences growing up as a child in Iran in the 70s, immigrating twice in the vulnerable teen years. It had to do with my personality in that I had, for most of my life, I've been a pleaser. And I felt that in order to belong, I had to please those around me. My mode of operation was to be good, the good girl, the good daughter, the good granddaughter, the good student. And when that is your mode of operation, and it is so important for you to please, the question of being anything but heterosexual is not even in your mind. So it took most of my life to come to terms with that. And so to answer your question, I don't think there is a right time. And to quote Jim Watson, the mayor of Ottawa, in his 2019 coming out letter, he said, don't feel pressured or rushed to come out, but don't wait 40 years. I think I chose to come out to myself first because I certainly was in the closet to myself for most of my life. But outside myself, it was my sister who I chose to come out to first. And it was definitely not an issue of obligation. It was because I knew that I would be unconditionally loved and supported. And in fact, that was how it went. Well, I can say that this is probably the case for many communities, not just the Iranian community, but being Iranian, of course, my experiences, I can only speak from my experiences. And this remains a taboo subject in our community. There are those in our community who are openly hostile to LGBTQ individuals, and with them, you know where you stand. And then there are those who are seemingly supportive and open-minded until it hits close to home. And so there are all sorts of challenges, but I think for me, the biggest challenge which I see in our community is the issue of shame. And along with shame comes fear. Fear of, for individuals such as myself, fear of not being accepted, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being judged, fear of being mocked. And it was this shame and fear that stopped me from looking inside and really admitting to myself who I was for so many years. It was also this same shame that after I figured out who I was for myself, it made it so difficult for me to come out broader to family and friends. And then I'm going to take it to a next level. It's the same shame and fear that makes families judge and shun their children and treat their children not in the most loving way they could. And I've thought a lot about the shame and the fear. And I'm not saying that it's all because of love, but I think there's a large part of the fear is rooted in love. Is because when we love someone, we get overprotective. And that love and protection shows up by way of fear. Fear of, oh my gosh, is my child going to be treated badly in the community? Is my child going to be able to get a job? Is my child going to have children? All of those fears, and from that protectiveness and fear comes the shame. So I think for our community, one of the biggest challenges is to deal with the shame and fear and those of our families and loved ones. Pride. I love the word pride is used to describe LGBTQ acceptance, resilience, equality, because we just talked about shame. And to me, pride is the opposite of shame, pride versus shame. For so long, the community has been shamed. And I think because pride, being visible and loud, is actually what is needed to pierce through the shame and to break the silence. And before actually I talk more about what pride means to me personally, what I wanted to talk about, which goes hand in hand with pride and shame, is that I think one of the ways we can deal with this shame is to talk about it, is to break the silence. We love to pretend that it's not there. Don't ask, don't tell. But that's why I'm here today. I'm here today, not because there's no fear. I'm gonna lie to you if I say that I have no fear showing up here today. But because I think how we break the shame cycle is to break the silence and to talk about it. That's also why I chose to come out in social media, not because my personal story is so unique or newsworthy. No, it's not at all about that. It's about the fact that once you can break the silence, then there is nothing anymore anyone can hide from and hide about. So when you ask me what pride means, I think pride is all about that. It's about breaking that shame. It's about speaking out loudly and being, not just coming out, but being visible for each other. So from a personal level, pride reminds me to be proud of myself, to be proud of what I have overcome and those who have spoken out and fought before me. It reminds me to be proud of my partner who came out in her youth. It reminds me to be proud of my son who identifies as bisexual and never came out because he never went into closet. In fact, he was always out. It reminds me to be proud of my other two children and my ex-husband who continue to be my most fierce allies and supporters. And of course, my friends and family who have all been there for me. My message to families and friends in our community who are trying to either come out or support their children who have come out is to really think about the shame and fear I already talked about. It's why is it there, and what can be done about it, to break the silence. It becomes a lot less powerful when we actually talk about it, when we are open about it. I also highly encourage us to support each other by speaking up against some of the behaviors that have for long been accepted in our community, but are actually no longer okay, have never been okay, and are not acceptable, such as homophobic jokes and comments. We've all heard them. I heard them throughout my life, all the jokes and comments about homos, Evas, all of that sort of commentary. You just never know in whose presence you are making these comments. And as allies, I think that we have a responsibility also to speak up against those things. Then there are the stereotypes. I think we need to start being more open about stereotypes. There are such deep-seated stereotypes and ignorance about the LGBT community. And I'm going to give you examples for myself as a person who came out in my mid-40s. There were questions such as, oh, are you now going to start looking like a man? Or so you're a liar because you are either lying now or you have lived a life of lies. And as an ally, I think we need to understand that things are not always so black and white. There are so many complex issues that go into the question of when someone decides to come out, if they decide to come out, and how. There are some resources that I would recommend in our community. They're not necessarily Farsi resources, but I still highly recommend to everybody in the community to seek out counseling and support services. There are plenty of those out there, both for parents, for children, and for families to attend together. I also highly recommend PFLAG Canada, which is spelled PFLAG Canada. It is a charitable organization founded by parents of LGBTQ individuals to provide support to the parents community and to their children. It has chapters all over Canada. Lastly, there are podcasts and books that I highly recommend. In terms of podcasts, there are Farsi podcasts and English ones. I'm not going to name them, but if you look for them, there are lots out there. In terms of books, there are two specific books that I found helped me. One of them is called The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. The book is not specifically about the LGBTQ community, but it is about understanding shame and having shame resilience and acceptance and loving ourselves. And the other book that I recommend is called Untamed by Glennon Doyle, which is a personal journey of a woman who came out in her late 30s, and similar to myself, after having been married and to a man and having had 3 children. So I found that resonated with me quite a bit. It's a good question, and it's a tough one. It's so easy to sit here and have this interview well, it's not easy for me, but I mean, to organize interviews might be relatively easy. The challenge is, how do we make it reach the audience that it needs to be reached? Because for 3 years, when I was part of the Iranian Women's Organization of Ontario, we ran a project to open the dialogue in the Iranian community on issues related to LGBTQ. And one of the most challenges that we had was that the attendance to our events was low, and those who attended were already those who knew what they needed to know for the most part. Uh, the trick is reaching those who are actually not willing to listen. I commend Yara Society for putting together this program. I think we need to have more of these. But if I may suggest, I think maybe there needs to be dialogues of this kind in Farsi, so that we can reach an audience who's not necessarily comfortable in English. The dialogues that are sensitive to all cultural values are important. I'm not sure if there is enough counseling and support groups that offer Farsi programs and services. I think our community needs the support that appreciates the nuances of our culture, the taboos of our culture. It's not helpful for an Iranian parent who has lived most of their life in Iran to go and see a counselor who has grown up and lived in Canada all their life and doesn't quite appreciate the difficulties and challenges that parent is facing in their community. So I think we just need to keep doing what we're doing, but multiply it maybe by 10 and offer it in more language accessible and culturally accessible manner.